Hi guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today I have a very special video for you guys, and I'm not just saying that. I have a This Is Not a Top 10, and it's a subscriber request video because this was requested by one of my subscribers, Ben. This one's for you, buddy. He wanted me to do a This Is Not a Top 10 of Basile fragrances in my collection. Basile's an herb. And the thing about Basile is it smells very different to different people. And the reason is that there's particular molecules in Basile that make it very multifaceted. There's a molecule called mercaptan, 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 that some people say smells like cat urine. There is methylcinnamate in Basile that some people say smells like cinnamon. But normally what you get when you talk about Basile is you get an herb. People remember the smell of Basile from, you know, their grandmother's cooking. Some people say it smells like licorice. Other people say it smells like anise. That cinnamon part comes from a molecule in Basile. There's even a molecule in Basile that will remind people of like a lemon tree, a lemon smell. So it does add this very fresh herbal opening to fragrances, and that's usually where you'll find it. The top is the most common where you'll find Basile in a fragrance, but sometimes you'll find it in the mid. And this is a very comprehensive list. This is going to be a long video. This is not going to be one of the 20-second TikTok videos. If that's what you're looking for, to be honest, you're probably on the wrong channel. I'm going to show you a ton of fragrances from my collection. They all have the note of Basile. Some of them will actually surprise you because some of these are a little bit more resinous, darker fragrances you wouldn't expect. Actually, I was a little bit shocked when I did research for this, how Basile is used in so many different types of fragrances. There's obviously the aromatic fougere fragrances you're thinking of, but there's also some very dark resinous fragrances as well. Goopy resinous fragrances. So since this is going to be a long video, let's just do scent of the day real quick. I brought my decant. I didn't bring the 250 ml flacon. It's pretty and everyone likes to look at it, but I just felt like I'd bring the decant. This is Creed's Venezia. Oh my God, I am in love with this scent. Absolute love with this scent. This is one of the best Creeds ever. I have a backup bottle coming. It's that good. And this is discontinued, unfortunately. I believe it's discontinued. It's a very simple scent. It's bergamot in the top with Bulgarian rose in the heart, and ambergris and sandalwood and vanilla in the base. Today, I was also smelling oak moss. In the dry down, I was smelling oak moss after about the 4 or 5 hour mark. But the opening will remind you a little bit of, think of fragrances like Shalimar, maybe Le Lion, but there's no labdanum here. It's all about the vanilla and what smells to me like real ambergris and real oak moss. Beautiful fragrance. It's not complex, but the ingredients are top notch. One of the best Creeds. No one talks about this one. Everyone else talks about Aventus and, you know, Green Irish Tweed and all that stuff. And those are deserving. They obviously are deserving in my opinion, but this is just as deserving. Look at the color of the juice too. Absolutely fantastic fragrance. So happy to have this, and I'm so happy to have a backup on the way. Okay, so let's jump into the Basile list. We're going to start old school, like I have been known to do. We're going to go back to the late 1800s when this fragrance came out. This is Jicky. And if you know fragrances, you know Jicky. Look at the beautiful bee bottle. This is a tester, so I don't have a cap, but I think there's 69 bees on this bottle if you count them. And in the old days, the bee was representative of the queen bee. You know, when you were making fragrances for the queen, that was like a sign that you were one of the royal distributors, was the bee slogan. And This is basically this animalic lavender fragrance. One of the first fragrances to use modern materials in a fragrance. Amy Guerlain is the perfumer. And the top is citrusy. There's rosemary, lemon, bergamot. It's the mid where the basil comes in. You get basil, you get orris, you get jasmine. The lavender is probably the star of the show. There is a leather and some spices in the base, and then there's civet. The civet goes a little bit halitosis on me. I think I prefer Mouchoir de Monsieur between the two, but as a fragrance lover and a fragrance enthusiast, Jicky is a must, absolute must own, just because this is the fragrance that basically started it all with modern perfumery. So Jicky, and Basil's in the mid here. And then we jump to 1955, and again, not my favorite type of fragrance, but you have to respect it for what it is. For decades and decades, this was a staple of masculine perfumery. This is called Chanel Pour Monsieur. This came out in 1955. Henri Robert, the world-famous Chanel perfumer, created this. And this is using Basil more in the traditional context that you're probably thinking, okay? So there is orange, lemon, vervain, neroli in the top, cardamom, coriander, basil, and ginger in the heart, and then oak moss, vetiver, and cedar wood in the base. It's very citrusy. It's very light. This lasts on me an hour if I'm lucky. And so usually I wear this in the tip top of summer, the dog days of summer, you know, I'll wear this fragrance. But it's very citrusy, very old school. You know, this came out in the 1950s. And this is how most people probably expect Basil to be used, but as you'll see later on in the video, that's not always the case. There's a lot of different uses of Basil. So, jumping forward a decade, but sticking with the same DNA in my mind, this is Eau Sauvage by Dior, EDT, not the parfum, the EDT. This is created by Edmond Rudnitska. Many perfumers claim this is the greatest perfume of all time. I would probably disagree. From Edmond Rudnitska, I much prefer Eau de Hermes. But if I told a perfumer that, they would probably respect that as well, because Eau de Hermes was one of the best creations ever as well. So you can't argue with that. I would even take Roja's Femme by Edmond Rudnitska over Eau Sauvage personally. But I can see why they like this. And actually, perfumers like to wear this because it doesn't get in the way of them smelling other fragrances. Many perfumers won't wear fragrance, actually. But this has basil, bergamot, rosemary, lemon, lavender, cumin in the top. He loved cumin, although I don't get much cumin from this. Cumin is much more amped up in his other creations like Roja's Femme and Eau de Hermes. And then there's orris, carnation, jasmine, coriander, patchouli, rose, and sandalwood in the mid, with amber, oak moss, musk, and vetiver in the base. Classic citrus fragrances. I did a masculine fragrances that would smell amazing on a woman, and this made the list. And actually, some of my women subscribers reported back that they did enjoy wearing this back in the day because, you know, in the old days, if you didn't want to smell florally, if you didn't want to have that traditional, maybe number 5 DNA or whatever it was, they wore this. If they didn't want sweet floral fragrances, they would wear this. This citrus fresh vibe in the summer. Smells absolutely gorgeous on any gender. Okay. Now we're going to jump to the year 1972. This is not in order, by the way. These are going to start being a mishmash of different things. But this is a 30 ml bottle that I have of Pierre Cardin Pour Monsieur. Now, my bottle is a very old formulation of this, as you can see. This was back when the distribution was still in France. And you don't get that with any of the newer bottles. They're made in New Jersey or a bunch of other places. Look at the atomizer. Hilarious. I love it. And I love this fragrance, actually. Parfumo says it's a spicy leather. I don't know about that. I get a lot of patchouli out of this fragrance for some reason. Patchouli, iris, the basil's in the top here. So this is where you start to notice the incorporation of basil to round out, you know, to give depth to a heavier, deeper fragrance. The Basil in the top is paired with bergamot and lavender, orange, and lemon. And then the mid is carnation, geranium, iris, leather, patchouli, and sandalwood with a base of amber, benzoin, leather, moss, tonka, and vanilla. So here, the Basil is kind of used as a trumpet, as an intro, and you're going to see that across a couple other deeper resinous fragrances. The patchouli in this is absolutely stunning, by the way. I know it's been reformulated, but if you can find an older France bottle, if you can find an older bottle like this, there's no Pierre Cardin logo on the top of my cap. You know, if you can find a bottle like this, it's absolutely amazing. Absolutely stunning. I love this fragrance. I wish I had more than a 30 ml, but I will wear this. This will get used. Okay, now we're going to jump forward to the 1980s. Specifically, excuse me while I grab my rag. I don't want any fingerprints on here. Okay, so we're jumping to the year 1981. And this is a fragrance by the House of Cartier, and it's called Santos de Cartier. This is the older bottle presentation with the amazing gray cap with gold with brown. I think Rich hates this this presentation, but I absolutely love it. It's so 1980s. But this is a classic use of Basil because it's paired in the top with very fresh notes like bergamot, lavender, juniper, lemon, vervain, geranium, nutmeg, pepper, rosemary, and vetiver in the mid, and then the base is amber, patchouli, sandalwood, vanilla, cedar, and maybe a hint of castoreum. But this is an all-year-round fragrance to me. This is not a winter fragrance. You could wear this anytime. It's not like it's 80s. You know, 1981 was the release date here. And if you think about other fragrances from the early 80s, Coros, Antaeus, some more coming up here later on, Leonard Porom, stuff like that. They're very loud, very heavy. Trussardi Uomo. This is very gentlemanly, very chic. You know, you're probably not going to offend anyone with this. This is gentleman. This is gentleman in a bottle, if you will. And it smells very distinguished. I love this fragrance, and the Basil, again, is used in the traditional aromatic way. This is kind of a tough fragrance for me to characterize because it does so many things. Give this a try if you can. If you can find these older bottles, they're preferable, but even the modern formulation is quite good from what I understand, but it's not going to have the depth of these older bottles. Speaking of older bottles, and this one I have a backup of because I love this fragrance so much. This is YSL's Jazz. And boy, I say this every time I talk about these fragrances, but it's much deserved here because you know, there's a bucket of about 4 or 5 fragrances that in my mind just kind of gets lumped together. YSL Jazz, Guerlain's Heritage, Escada pour Homme, those kind of fragrances to me, it's so good. They just do something special to me. You know, I feel so comfortable and so at home with these. Maybe it's because I was a kid when these came out and this is what men smelled like when I was younger. I really don't know, but whatever it is, I feel very comfortable and at home wearing these types of fragrances, especially this Jazz black and white bottle, the piano key bottle, if you will. You know, if you can find these older bottles, it is an amazing fragrance. This is one of my favorite fragrances from YSL. Obviously, Coros is top, but this is a very close second, along with the women's Opium. And this uses basil, anise, bergamot, tarragon, cardamom, coriander, lavender, nutmeg, and cinnamon in the top. And then it has this really interesting heart. It's carnation, geranium, iris, and jasmine. So it's a floral heart, but it stays so masculine. Amber, oak moss, leather, musk, sandalwood, tobacco in the base, tonka, cedar. Amazing creation. I love Jazz. I better speed this up. This is going to be a 3-hour video. Okay, next we're going to go to Guerlain. Speaking of Guerlain, and this is a fragrance called Coriolan. This is discontinued. It was repackaged into a fragrance called Lame Dune Eros, and then that was discontinued. And so Guerlain Coriolan, I am a big fan of this fragrance, actually. I have a backup bottle of this as well. Look at the presentation. Absolutely beautiful. When they used to actually put time into a presentation, into a bottle. It's got the Guerlain B on the atomizer. And this is so good in summer. This is Coriolan is a Chiffre fragrance that has a very sharp, almost fennel-like smell. So you get bergamot, you get neroli, petitgrain, sage, and lemon, and then basil's listed in the mid. You know, these note pyramids, don't take it so literal. I smell basil in the opening with this. They just are trying to give you an idea of kind of the notes that you're going to smell. It's not like, oh, it's in the mid, so I won't smell it for the first 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes everything kind of hits you all at once. This is one of those fragrances where you feel like you get hit with everything at once, but it's done so beautifully. And it does change. It does evolve on my skin. And this is just the wrong fragrance for the time it was released. This came out in the 90s, 1998, when everyone was big on, you know, Acqua di Gio, Issey Miyake, L'Odyssey, stuff like that. This is a fragrance that Jean-Paul Guerlain started working on when he was working on Derby when Derby came out in 85. So that means he was working on Derby probably in the late 70s or early 80s. And whenever LVMH gave him a chance to release a final masculine, he tried to catch lightning in a bottle again like he did with Heritage. And he released this, and unfortunately it flopped, and a year or two later it was discontinued. But I think this is a great fragrance. The problem is you have to find bottles that are unsprayed because there's so many citruses in this. This is a citrus Chiffre that I actually like. I like this way more than Pour Monsieur or Eau Sauvage. I think it's underrated. I think Coriolan is highly underrated, and I love the name and the story. You know, Jean-Paul Guerlain being a bit of a rebel. Okay, now we're going to go to the House of Dior. And this is an older bottle back when they used to put Christian Dior on the bottle. And this is Dune. This is a great example of basil because this is basil in the top mixed with a lovely note of fig leaf. So it's fig leaf and currant leaf with sage, fig tree bark in the mid. So fig is used many times throughout this fragrance. Rose, sandalwood, tonka, vanilla, and cedarwood. Another stunning summer fragrance, and this is how you would expect basil to be used. Very aromatic, very, you know, fresh, bright, zingy opening. That currant leaf maybe is a mixture. Your nose might distinguish some of that cat piss smell I was talking about earlier from basil with the currant leaf. And but the fig here is absolutely beautiful. It's one of my favorite fig fragrances. One of my favorite summer fragrances to just lather on. You can just go to town with this. You won't offend anyone. And if you can get an older bottle that actually says Christian Dior, not just Dior, do it. But the new ones are quite good as well. It's all discontinued now, if I'm not mistaken. So any bottle you can grab is worth grabbing. I think Anouge at Enchanté has a whole box of these. So if you're in the market for Dune, get with Anouge. Okay, now we are going to talk about a fragrance that you probably are not expecting. Some of these are going to be a shock to you. This is the original Gucci Pour Homme from 2003. I love this bottle. Look at this bottle. Look at this cap. Look at that. Absolutely beautiful. And it's heavy too. This fragrance. It must be cherished. I mean, look at that. This is Michel Almerac, 2003. This is basil, bergamot, tarragon, ginger in the top. So you get this very sprightly, fresh type of opening, but it's instantly swallowed up by heavier notes like papyrus, pimento, amber, vanilla, vetiver, musk, sage, tonka, and the star of the show, frankincense. The frankincense in here, for a designer, the frankincense in here is absolutely beautiful. You wouldn't expect this from a designer. Definitely would not expect this from a designer today, I'll tell you that. Now Gucci hit lightning in a bottle again with Gucci Guilty Absolute. There's one you didn't expect from a designer, right? But with this 2003 release, Basile is used and then instantly swallowed up by those heavier notes, but it's made to give off that fresh opening, that beautiful zingy fresh opening that just doesn't last long at all, because that's a darker, heavier fragrance. Okay, now we're gonna go to the house of Loewe, and this is Esencia. Now this is not the newest bottle, but not the oldest bottle either. I like the artwork on the leather on the top of the cap. So apparently Loewe is now putting the EDT of Esencia in their square bottle or whatever. Kind of like Guerlain had that Listerine bottle for the longest time. It's an LVMH brand, so they're all doing that now to save money. So these older bottles are no more. But this is a great example of Basile because there's so much green going on. There's bergamot, tarragon, galbanum, lavender, petitgrain, juniper, and lemon. And then the heart is where the Basile comes in. But you almost smell it from the beginning here as well, where you smell a lot of greenery going. This is a great Basile take on Basile. Geranium, jasmine, lily of the valley, nutmeg, clary sage, narrowly, pine, and rose. So you have pine, you have tarragon, galbanum, juniper, and basil. A lot of green, smelling elements there. And then the base is oak moss, more green, amber, leather, patchouli, fir. There's balsam fir in the base, tonka, vetiver, and cedar. Great fragrance. I love wearing this in the spring and fall. I'll even wear this in summer sometimes when I'm in the mood. Fantastic fragrance. If you can find these older bottles, get them. And if you can find an even older bottle than this, get that as well, because the oak moss in the old ones is stunning. Speaking of old bottles, this is a vintage that I scored off of Anuj from Enchanté. And I think this was the last one he had, but I'm very lucky to even have it. It's a 30 ml, and it's from the house of Ungaro, and it's called Pour L'Homme 2. Now, the perfumer on Fragrantica shows Jacques Polge. The perfumer on Parfumo shows Francois Demachy, and we know that they work together to create perfumes. They have another one coming up. Basile is used in the top here. There's some citruses a la, Pour Monsieur, maybe like the concentrate, not the EDT from 55, but the concentrate from the late 80s. And then there is a beautiful floral heart here. There's a big musk note in this too, huge musk. The musk here is really turned up, and there's a lovely civet that comes through in the dry down as well. This is discontinued, by the way, but I would much rather wear something like this in the spring and summer rather than just the regular Pour Monsieur. It's more interesting, there's more facets to it. You do get the old school lavender and carnation, which I actually really love. There's a note I'd love to see make a comeback is carnation. Geranium, ginger, orris root. The orris root here is beautiful. It is powdery. It's definitely powdery. If you like powders, you have to check this one out. If you can get your hands on a older bottle, do so. If you can get your hands on one of these older bottles, this is definitely one to put on the to sniff list. I don't know why it's not picking that up. There you go. Put this on the to sniff list. All right, another one you probably are going to be a little bit shocked at is this. This is Krazy Krizia. Now, this is the EDT, but the EDP would also work. This is a Dominique Ropion, one of the best tonka fragrances I've ever smelled. But to announce that heavier tonka, I mean, look at the color of the juice. Look at that. absolutely stunning. There's aldehydes in the top with basil and bergamot and mandarin orange, peach, galbanum. The galbanum is pretty big in the opening. And then it just goes into that floral resinous. There's labdanum, beautiful labdanum. There is sandalwood, but the tonka is one of the stars of the show here. Big tonka fragrance. And Dominique Ropion, again, you know, it's funny. People will pay thousands for his Frederic Malle fragrances, but they won't pay $50 for something like this. A composition he probably spent just as much time on. And so Krazy Krizia, the Basil in the top is very unexpected. A fragrance, if you're a Basil lover, you probably don't have this on your Basil list. One to definitely check out. Now, an absolute brilliant use of Basil is in the fragrance called L'Insoumis. This is one of my favorite modern fougere fragrances. This is so underrated. This is a gem, especially what you can get. This is a 100 ml bottle. I don't think I paid more than $40 for this, and oh, it's so good. Basil, bergamot, and rum in the opening. So the basil here is very prominent. If you're going, okay, you know, the basil's probably not prominent enough in a fragrance like Krazy Krizia because it's resinous and stuff like that. You want the basil prominent. Check this out. This is a fantastic take on basil, especially in the opening. Bergamot, rum, and then the heart is clary sage, lavender, black pepper. The base is patchouli, Haitian vetiver, moss, and what's called clear wood, which is a synthetic molecule one of the big brands owns probably. Fabrice Pellegrin made this. And I'll tell you what, if you're a lover of old school aromatic fougères, you have to get your nose on this. And then I want to show you a fragrance I am in love with, and I wish I had a backup bottle of, to be honest with you, but I don't. This is called Joint. The writing has actually come off, but it's called Joint by Rocco Barocco. And this came out in 93, but it feels like it came out in 83. Oh, God. This is so good. And again, this is another one where you wouldn't expect basil to play much of a role, but it's there in the opening to add a little bit of, you know, texture, distinction. It's mugwort, bergamot, lemon, and basil. Aldehydes, green notes, caraway, and coriander. Freaking green notes. Carnation, jasmine, geranium. There is a little bit of that Koros thing going on, that dirty freshness, you know, dichotomy. And then there's tobacco and honey and orris. I love orris, and I love tobacco, and I love honey. It has everything I love. This has everything I love. Vetiver, musk, labdanum in the base. The labdanum is to die for. The patchouli is prominent here as well. It says there's real ambergris, tonka, civet, and leather. And let me tell you, this is a banger. Sebastian, who has, you know, his channel has like 250,000 subscribers or something crazy. He put this as his #1 vintage masculine fragrance of all time. That kind of shocked me. But you know what? I respect that. I'm not surprised, because this is a, oh God, it's so good. I really need a backup before you guys scoop them all up. But that's Joint by Rocco Barocco. Okay, now we're going to go to 1975. We're going to go back in time. This is from the house of Denim, and this is Original Denim from 1975, just the normal EDT. I scooped this up for $20. Oh, it's so good. This is maybe basil more in the traditional sense, because it's at the top and it's mixed with citruses and lemon and orange blossom, but it's the mid and the heart, or the heart and the base, that is absolutely stunning. You get this bay leaf accord, which is also used in Jubilation 25, which I love. It's used to perfection here. Bay leaf, vermouth, patchouli, cedar, pepper, cardamom, cinnamon, tonka, amber, oak moss, and then there's leather in the base. I love this fragrance. And for the value for money, okay, the atomizer's cheap and it sucks, but So what? The value for money, I mean, what you're getting for 100 ml of this is astronomically high. You are getting such a great fragrance. I wish I had an old bottle and I could compare, because this is a new one, I think. Contour. I don't know who Contour SRL is, but whoever they are, made in Italy. They're still making it in Italy. So even this modern formulation is amazing. And I think there's frankincense in here as well. There's no frankincense note listed, but I think there's frankincense. Okay, the prototypical fougere. If you like fragrances like this, you have to check out L'Insoumis. I mentioned L'Insoumis is a great fougere. This is where the modern takes on a fougere really just took off, and that's Azzaro Pour Homme. This is the older bottle with the sticker on the front, and this is a splash, unfortunately, but it's okay. Just glad to have it. The anise in this is absolutely stunning. This is anise with basil, bergamot, iris, lavender. This is a fougere through and through. It's juniper, it's oak moss in the base, there's musk, there's vetiver, there's even a little bit of tonka, but it doesn't feel sweet to me. It's just there, you know, to it's there to round everything out. Oh, God. The basil is used very traditionally here in the top with the citruses, but the anise note in this is to die for. If you love anise, you have to smell some of these older bottles of Azzaro Pour Homme. Okay, now we're going to go to another vintage fragrance, and we're now on the left side of the desk, thank God. The right side is done, and it is Salvador Dali Pour Homme with the lips. Kiss me, baby. This is a fragrance that I think this is Thierry Vassa's the best work, personally. I love this fragrance with a passion. I have a backup. This is a 50 ml manufactured by COFCI. And I have a 100 ml backup bottle, thank God, because I love this fragrance so much. And this is, you know, these two are two peas in a pod, Joint and Salvador Dali Pour Homme. And this uses basil with anise again, and then bergamot, tarragon, lavender, mandarin orange, and lemon. The mid has a heliotrope note with moss, geranium, jasmine, lily of the valley, and then amber, musk, patchouli, vanilla, and vetiver. Also, I pick up some maybe civet or something like that that's not listed here. There's some animalic facet to this as well. But it's absolutely stunning. It's so masculine. It's so good. I love these fragrances. I can't wait to go back to the office so I can wear stuff like this again. Have everyone's head turn when I walk by. Okay, now we're going to go to a fragrance that I actually don't care so much for. It's not my thing. And again, it goes back to that citrusy... here, let me spray it. It's been a while. Let's spray this. This is Versace L'Homme, by the way. It's just... There's basil, bergamot, and petitgrain in the top, pimento and lemon. Carnation, jasmine, patchouli, rose, sandalwood, cedar, and cinnamon, and amber, oak moss, labdanum, leather, musk, tonka, and vanilla. It's just the way it's blended. The citruses are very prominent. Maybe a vintage bottle would be better. This is a modern bottle. I bought this because early Greeks said that the modern stuff is still good. And I'm a little bit, it's not my thing. It's a good fragrance. It's just not my thing. I'm not a big fan of that style. Another one that I'm not a big fan of that uses basil in the top is a fragrance called Sybaris. And this is a Alberto Morias, back when he used to do fragrances like this. This is a Chifra, spicy Chifra. It's an aldehydic top with basil and cumin, and the cumin here and the cinnamon here is really amped up. And the cumin and cinnamon, and I said basil can sometimes give off that, you know, cinnamon-like smell. It feels like it was overdone to my nose. It feels very overdone in the opening. Once you get to the dry down, it's a really nice fragrance. But why would I want to wait 3 hours for the dry down to come through to start enjoying it when I can wear something like this that I just love through and through, you know? But Sybaris deserves a shout. It's also discontinued, and this was marketed by Puig. Marketed by Puig. Rosendal Matu worked with Alberto Morias, by the way, to create this fragrance. It's not a bad fragrance, especially by modern standards. This is actually a really good fragrance. It's just, it feels a little bit unbalanced to me. So now, probably the fragrance I should have started with, just because of the name, is Basile Uomo. How could you make a Basil? This is not a top 10 video and not put Basile Uomo in here. And so this is a tester bottle that I scored. And it's a short ingredient list: alcohol, denat, aqua, water, parfum, fragrance. That's it. And this is, if you like fragrances like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, excuse me, this is a little bit like Paco Rabanne Pour Homme done in an Italian style, if you will. There's basil, vervain, grapefruit, lavender, rosemary, tarragon, thyme, and lemon. That rosemary basil thing will harken back to Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. Galbanum, clove, jasmine, nutmeg, rose, blackcurrant, and cinnamon, and oak moss, leather, and patchouli and sandalwood. So you'll probably have to reapply. This isn't going to last more than 6 or 7 hours, but for those 6 hours, it's absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful fragrance. Unfortunately discontinued, but there are still bottles floating around. You can find this for a good price. I didn't pay a lot of money for this. I think I paid $35 for this 100 ml. No cap, but so what? Okay. Now, we are going to go to the House of Marbert, and this is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. This is called Marbert Man. This is another one that I think Anuj might have some bottles of if you're interested. This is made in Germany, of course. Marbert's a German brand. And this is done by Raymond Scheilan, who is a fantastic perfumer. I only have a couple from him, but he's an amazing perfumer. God. This is bergamot, lavender, lemon, mugwort with basil and aldehydes in the top. The mid is rose, geranium, juniper, carnation, cinnamon, and honey. The honey in this is so perfect. It's perfect. The basil and the bergamot, lavender, mugwort, lemon opening thing gives this kind of fresh, aromatic type vibe. And then you get that animalic honey underneath with patchouli. Oh, it's amazing. I would love a backup of this as well. I would love an old bottle, a very old bottle. I think the old bottles had like a red cap, if I'm not mistaken. But Anuj sent me a deodorant spray with this as well. And so I used both one day, and it's absolutely stunning. We'll definitely get some more wear. This is one I feel like could easily be a signature scent. Even though it's got honey, patchouli, ambergris, leather, musk, there's nothing stopping you from wearing this anytime. Any place, anytime you could wear this, and it just smells amazing to me. Okay, now we're going to go to the House of Creed, and I think it's the only Creed on this list. And this is a fragrance called Arolfa, and this is my dent. I have made this dent, which is a hell of a dent. However, when you're talking about summer frags, you can really apply, and with a Creed, you're not going to offend anyone anyways. This is the old They called it the fire hose atomizer. It would just dump juice on you. I miss these atomizers. And this fragrance is a beautiful take on basil because there's a bunch of different green things happening. There's basil, rosemary, coriander, and then there's even a pine note that I don't think is listed in Parfumo. But it's contrasted with cumin and melon in the top, which sounds insane, and it could be insane. But then there's cyclamen, ginger, jasmine, coriander, and pepper in the mid. Amber, musk, sandalwood, cedarwood, oak moss. I think that amber is supposed to be ambergris. And I think this is a Pierre Bourdon. Pierre Bourdon is now listed as the perfumer on Fragrantica. So it's kind of an aquatic, but there's still old school elements going on. There's that pine, there's basil, there's cumin, there's cyclamen, there's violet. There's a lot more going on than just aquatic. And so I really like this in the dog days of summer, and I will finish this bottle. But as far as a basil opening goes, it's absolutely stunning. Okay. Now here's a discontinued fragrance, not the fragrance itself, the concentration, the eau de parfum concentration. It's still available in cologne and parfum, but this vintage, especially the paper label, is no more. And this is called Scandal. This is one of my favorite, like, modern fresh fragrances. It's so good. It takes that citrus DNA, which I say I hate so much, and it turns it into something that I love. And again, this is my beef with the House of Roja. He creates stuff like this that makes me go, wow, this is amazing. But is it $500 amazing? I don't know. You know, it's definitely good. I'm glad I have this bottle. Will I replace it when it's gone? No, I will not buy the parfum, and I will not buy the cologne. That's just my opinion. I have samples of both, actually, and I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed with either. I miss this version. Roja is a controversial figure, I understand, but he really hit this one out of the park. And look at his old caps. They're very standard. You know, not all bedazzled like the new ones, but needless to say, this came out over a decade ago, and the basil, bergamot, lavender. This is a great example of basil used to perfection because they mix it with. There's also this spearmint note in here, and then it goes into this very traditional fougere style with May Rose, Lily of the Valley, Jasmine from Grasse, Violet, Ambergris. Apparently there's real ambergris in here. It wouldn't surprise me if there is because it smells very posh. It smells very expensive. That floral heart DNA that he is known for, that you see over and over again in his fragrances, shows up here. But it's contrasted with those fresh notes. It's so good. Okay, now we're going to go to one of my favorite fragrances of all time. And this is from the house of Chanel. And this is Antaeus. Yes, Basil is in Antaeus. This is my little 50 ml. I've shown my 100 ml bottle many a times with the EDT above Chanel. So I figured I'd show kind of the middle reformulation, if you will. I think this is a 2005 bottle, if I'm not mistaken. 5501. But it's got the silver atomizer, not black. Black atomizer is the new formulation. And this is bergamot, coriander, lime, clary sage, myrrh, and lemon. The myrrh is beautiful. And then the heart is basil, jasmine, rose, and thyme. And then it's all about the castoreum, oak moss, labdanum, and patchouli in the base. One of my favorite fragrances ever. One of my favorite leather fragrances of all time. It's so good. So good. And Jacques Polge and Francois Demachy. Okay. now we're going to jump to the house of Aramis, and this is a classic use of Basel. This is called Tuscany per Uomo. And this is a vintage bottle. If you can find these old bottles with the star on the bottom and this older presentation that actually says the name here and not just on the front, that's what you want. The new ones just have a little sticker. But the bottle looks very similar to this bottle, so be careful. But this is a perfect example of Basel because it's offset, if you will, with anise, and this is one of the best anise fragrances along with Azzaro Pour Homme. So it's offset with anise, lavender, lime, lemon, tarragon, caraway, orange blossom, of course basil, oak moss, leather, patchouli, sandalwood, tonka, and cinnamon. It's so, what's the word? It's so perfect for what it does. You know, I love that fresh sharpness that hits you. This is so great for summer. And this bottle will get a hell of a lot of use this year. I'm going to wear the piss out of that bottle this summer. Okay, now we're going to go to the house of Ted Lapidus. And this is Lapidus Pour Homme. Okay, now Lapidus Pour Homme, you might be a little bit shocked to see here. And this is an old splash. They don't make these splash bottles anymore, okay? They only do the ones with the built-in sprayer. But I'll tell you what, old version or new version, it's a beautiful fragrance. It's pineapple in the top with basil, bergamot, tarragon, juniper. There's honey. There's rose and rosewood. There's musk. There's amber, there's oak moss, there's tobacco, there's cedar. There's so much going on. But the basil just works with that fresh pineapple in the opening to perfection. This is, again, one of my favorite fragrances. You're starting to see a trend in my favorite fragrances. I love these old school fragrances, you know. This was such a, this is perfection for the 80s. This just, you know, this just speaks to what the 80s were all about. Bold, loud, distinguished. I love those fragrances. Another one from the 80s that I love that has basil that kind of took me back is Leonard Pour Homme. I have a third bottle of this coming, these little 25 mLs. I love these bottles, by the way. And I love this fragrance. I absolutely adore this fragrance. 1980. Basil, bergamot, lavender, marjoram, petitgrain, and thyme in the top. With Artemisia, carnation, carrot, not carrot seed, but actual carrot note. With cedarwood, cinnamon, jasmine, iris. The iris is amazing here. Patchouli, vetiver, and then the base of amber, castoreum, labdanum, leather, moss, musk, frankincense. These are two of my favorite leather fragrances of all time, right here. And they both have basil in them. Interestingly enough. I love this stuff. I'm so glad I have another bottle coming. I couldn't imagine being without it. Okay. Now, another all-time classic. And this is from the house of Oscar de la Renta. This is called Pour Loewe. Now, if you can find a older Sanofi version, Sanofi or older, get it. Because Pour Loewe, it has this twist cap. I'm always worried about taking it off. It's a splash. Oh, it's so good. The aldehydes in the top are beautiful with anise, basil, bergamot, galbanum, caraway, lavender, sage, and juniper, cyclamen, carnation, and then the base has a gorgeous leather and labdanum combo with oak moss. Stunning fragrance. 1980, the best thing the house of Oscar de la Renta ever did, hands down, no questions asked. This is a absolute gem of a fragrance. All right, now we're gonna go to the house of Halston. And this is, we're going to work back in time. I have 3 Halston fragrances here. The first one is Catalyst for men. You saw this on my boozy fragrance list because there's a vodka note in here, believe it or not. So there's a vodka note, and it's mixed with, there's 1,000 notes in this fragrance, by the way. I'm not going to read them, but basil with citruses in the top and flowers. Narcissus and tuberose and rose and are in the top with jasmine. Those are all top notes. Mid is geranium, grass, chamomile. There's a chamomile note in here that's so soothing. Bay leaf makes an appearance again. This is an insane fragrance. Roja Dove eats his heart out with the fragrance like this. This is so complex, and this is a vintage bottle made by Halston Fragrances. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but trust me, it's Halston Fragrances. So good. This is going to get a hell of a lot of wear in summer for me as well. And look at that test tube bottle. God, I miss these old bottles. I really miss these. Another old fragrance back when it was Halston Fragrances. Whoops, I guess I should flip it the right way for you guys. Is 1-12. And this is another discontinued fragrance, unfortunately. Basil, galbanum, citruses in the top with lavender, pine, labdanum, amber, oak moss, cedar, vanilla, and tonka. Such a pleasant fragrance. I could wear this any time of the year, honestly. It is, it's a little bit green. There's nothing off-putting about this. You could wear this any time. Now, its brother, Halston Z-14, which gets all the love. And here's a Halston Fragrances ink bottle of Halston Z-14. That's what you want. If it would focus. Okay, whatever. It's Halston Fragrances. Oh, so good. Halston Z-14 is basil, bergamot, gardenia, lemon, and cypress. The cypress here is absolutely beautiful. In fact, Tom Ford made a fragrance called Italian Cypress that smells very similar to Halston Z-14. The old bottles of Halston Z-14, when it was Halston Fragrances Inc. And even though this is only a cologne concentration, I get great longevity and projection off of this. There is nothing cheap. Maybe the newer versions, when EA reformulated them, don't smell as good. But there's nothing cheap about this to my nose. It is a fantastic fragrance. Cinnamon. The cinnamon in here is gorgeous. One of the best cinnamon notes in all of perfumery is in Z-14. This and Balenciaga Pour Homme are two of my favorite cinnamon notes of all time. And then it's the leather, the moss, the benzoin, tonka. There's frankincense. There's so much going on. And to think, you used to be able to buy this for pennies, peanuts. Value for money was through the roof with this fragrance. And then the basil's in the top, of course, with the citruses where it belongs. Okay, now we're going to go to the house of Trussardi. And this is Trussardi Uomo. Now, Trussardi Uomo is one of the best examples of Italian-style spices with leather. And the spices here are absolutely stunning. They smell like, you know, your grandmother's spice kitchen, because you get this basil, marjoram, thyme, juniper, bay laurels. The bay laurel here is absolutely stunning. There's even a honey note that mixes with the labdanum and the leather. There's frankincense in the base to give it a little bit of texture. Moss, oak moss. I love this fragrance. One of my favorite Italian leather fragrances, up there with Fendi Uomo. Okay, now two green fragrances that are two peas in a pod. The first is going to be One Man Show. And One Man Show is probably what you think about when you think about basil. There's basil, bergamot, grapefruit, galbanum, rose, ylang ylang, jasmine, and Brazilian rosewood, patchouli, sandalwood, Lebanon cedar, very specific. Nutmeg, frankincense, labdanum, and cistus in the base. I am not the biggest fan of this fragrance, to be honest with you. It hasn't grown on me yet. I'm going to keep wearing it. I'll wear it again soon. Roger Pellegrino was the perfumer. I love the House of Bogart, but this one is not my favorite. I'd rather wear Signature. I'd rather wear Furio. Furio is way more my style. But the Basel plays a big part here, and maybe a more improved version of that is this. This is called Krizia Uomo, and you know I love the House of Krizia. And Krizia put out Uomo in '83, so 3 years after One Man Show. And it definitely borrowed from One Man Show. There is some aldehydes. There's Artemisia and Basel, which is a winning combo, and it will show up again here in a minute. Juniper, mandarin, orange, lemon with cyclamen, carnation, geranium, jasmine, pine. The pine is huge in this. And sandalwood, cedar, oak moss, leather, musk, patchouli, vetiver. Absolutely green as green can be. This is the green machine. And it's not my favorite. Again, it's very similar to One Man Show. These two are two peas in a pod. I prefer the Krizia, but they both share very similar DNAs. Okay. Now we're going to go to a fragrance that I'm going to do a comparison video between a older formulation of this and this modern formulation one day, but all of it's discontinued now, apparently. It's from Giorgio Beverly Hills, and it's called Red for Men. And Red uses Artemisia and Basel. Again, winning combo. That's going to show up again here in a minute. With Caraway, there's a floral heart, and then, of course, this leathery oak moss thing going on in the base. This is not the best reformulation, the EA fragrances. If you can find an older bottle, which I have a 5 ml mini of an older bottle, I am going to do a comparison video for you guys one day soon. Good fragrance, but this reformulation is just not up to snuff, in my opinion. Okay, one that absolutely shocked me when I saw there was Basel. It was not what I was expecting. This is the farthest thing from Basel that came to my mind, is this. Hugo Boss #1. I have an older bottle that doesn't say #1 right here. That's my backup. Thank you, Anuj. This is one of my favorite fragrances of all time. One of the best honey fragrances of all time. It is basil, bergamot, tarragon, grapefruit, green apple, caraway, juniper, and lemon. So the basil mixes with the bergamot and the greenness, but it just gets swallowed up so fast. Just like I mentioned in some of these other resinous fragrances like this, that the basil is there for opening effect. That's exactly what it's like here. It's there for opening effect, and then it just gets swallowed up by the tobacco, oak moss, honey. I just want to wear this now. I just want to wear this. It's so good. One of the best fragrances of all time. One of the best masculines. And 1985. Great year. Okay. Now we're going to go to a modern niche fragrance that I'm not the biggest fan of, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why. It's this. It's Free Fall Etruscan Water by Francesca Bianchi. Her brand kind of took off. She does these little 30 ml extrait de parfums. And there's green mandarin orange with bergamot, petitgrain, and grapefruit. There's basil, caraway, immortelle, ambergris, musk, labdanum, orris, jasmine, oak moss, and vetiver. I bought this because Persolaise, on one of his interviews with her, compared this to this. This is one of my favorite leather chiffres of all time. This is, if you're not familiar, a fragrance by the house of Estee Lauder, and it's called Azzaro. And as you can see, this is the vintage, one of the best oak moss fragrances of all time, one of the best leather chiffres of all time, one of the best fragrances you can buy, pound for pound, dollar for dollar, whatever it is. Bernard Champ made this. If you like fragrances like Aramis from the 60s, check this out. This is a mind-blowing fragrance. And because this just can't compare to this, maybe I'm not being fair, because I know this and I love this and I need a backup bottle of this. Basil's in the top in both. But the oak moss, the leather, everything else, ingredient-wise, this just blows this away. You know, this smells very modern. This smells modern niche, if that makes sense. It smells, the materials smell like a modern niche fragrance. This smells like you're hit with this real oak moss, this amazing leather, this, you know, this is a great, you know, role play and why modern niche sometimes just can't hold a candle to the past. They try, but they just can't. I mean, it's no knock on Francesca Bianchi, and I've given this a couple wears. It's not like I've only worn it once and I'm talking down on it. I just, you know, for me, I would take this all day and twice on Sunday. So there's that. Okay, one of the classical examples, again, of bergamot, of Basil, is this. Eau de Rochas. I love this bottle because it looks like your fingerprints are right here and there's like waves emanating from where you touch the water. Great bottle, especially this vintage with this cap. If you can find this version, get it, because this smells like a very expensive niche fragrance called Neroli Sauvage by Creed. This smells exactly like Neroli Sauvage to me. And this is one of the best uses of bergamot, basil. It's mixed with bergamot, but the basil in the top and bergamot and lime is to die for. This is one of the best citrus fragrances, actually. There's freesia, carnation, jasmine, and violet, oak moss, musk, vetiver, amber, cedar. Stunning summer fragrance and stunning use of basil, by the way. And then we're going to go to a modern house, and this came out a couple years back, 2016, and it's called Milano Cento for him. And Milano Cento, you get this lemon bergamot and petitgrain, and then you get lavender, rosemary, basil, and clary sage, sandalwood, patchouli, clove, cinnamon, amber, and musk. And so the basil is listed in the heart here, but it feels like, you know, the opening will remind you a little bit of a fragrance like Koros. And this is a fougere. And that's why there's this debate whether Koros is a fougere or a chiffre. I don't know, but when I smell stuff like this, it makes me feel like maybe Koros is more of a fougere. Because you get that very Koros opening, but it dries down much more to a classic fougere. That's where that basil tends to come in. Very interesting fragrance, especially for a modern fragrance. You know, we need more releases like this, to be honest with you. We don't get enough interesting stuff like this that gets released. So Milano Cento for him deserves a shout. And then one of my favorite uses of basil in all of perfumery, and this is actually going to be the thumbnail. This is a fragrance called Chiffre Siam from the House of Rogue Perfumery. So these are the old caps. They don't have these anymore. But let me tell you something. For a self-taught perfumer, this is perfection. This is actually one of my favorite chiffres. And there's real oak moss in here. Look at the color of the juice. Look at what real oak moss absolute does to the color of the juice. This is basically basil with kefir lime. If you've ever had that kefir lime in Indian food, you know it has a very unique smell. And you get that kefir lime and it mixes with basil in the opening to perfection with jasmine, ylang, oak moss, leather. And then there's a dirtiness to it because there's civet and benzoin and spices. But what a chiffre fragrance this is. Chiffre Siam is it may be the best take on just the note of basil in the opening that you can smell. It's gorgeous. And the dry down's gorgeous. It doesn't fall apart. It's an amazing fragrance. And I don't say that all the time, as you know. Okay, couple more. Next is from the house of Guy Laroche, and this is Drakkar Noir. This is a Cosmere bottle. And this is basically... This was the scent of the early 80s for many. This is Artemisia and Basil with lavender, lemon vervain, coriander, juniper, carnation, jasmine, cinnamon, amber, oak moss, leather, patchouli, sandalwood, fir, vetiver, and cedarwood. It is very fresh. You get that dihydromercenol freshness that is associated with Drakkar Noir. Great in the summer. And the Basil's there kind of in the top to mix with the Artemisia and lavender and bring you into the rest of the fragrance. I mean, what else can you say about Drakkar Noir that's not already said? And then I have to give this one a shout out, a special shout out. It got put at the end because it's a special fragrance. And it's Amouage Memoir Man. This got shown yesterday when we were talking about perfumers, because I did a perfumers portfolio video on Karine Vinchon Spinner. And I'll tell you what, this is her first fragrance. What a first fragrance. This is one of the best wormwood examples, but mixing with the wormwood is mint and basil, and those two play off of each other in the opening brilliantly. Mint, basil, wormwood, lavender absolute, rose. It's an amouage, so you know there's going to be frankincense, and there's even a tobacco note in the base. I love tobacco. With leather. It's such a unique scent. It's not going to be an easy wear for somebody that doesn't have experience. Look at the dent I've put in this bottle, by the way. That's my dent. Look at that. I love this fragrance, as you can tell. And my only regret is I wish I had got one with a cap, because this really stands out in my collection with no cap. So that is an hour of This Is Not a Top 10 of Basil. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for sticking around with me. I'll see you again tomorrow. Please leave a comment below. Let me know if there are some Basil fragrances I should check out. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have experience with these fragrances. If there's other fragrances that, if there's other This Is Not a Top 10 videos you wanna hear. Obviously, I haven't done some of the big ones. Like, I haven't done vanilla or clove or stuff like that, but I will. I'll do some of those. I haven't done tonka. So there's a lot of This Is Not a Top 10 ingredient list videos to make still. So I hope you've enjoyed this. It takes a lot of time to pull all this stuff out and then put it all back. And let me know what you think. As always, a like is always appreciated, but I'll never ask you. And I thank you very much for sharing some time with me today. Cheers, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.